Good morning. It's been a great week, hasn't it? 2 baptisms, that's exciting. You know, I wanted to share a little bit about Danny's baptism. He was actually met by Victor Montano on campus, not knowing that that was Victor's nephew. So all of a sudden they get hooked to, hey, you know, that kind of thing. Finds out they're studying. Of course, Victor Robles is fired up that Victor Montano has reached out to his nephew. And of course, then he got his brothers coming along, and then his mother, which is his sister, Victor Robles' sister. So it's exciting to see family come together, is it not? So a lot of exciting things. We got a lot of movement going on with all the announcements, right? They're like, what is that? What we got? What? And it's a lot of planning, a lot of things happen. You know, we come back from the GLC, and you know, we're kind of fired up, right? We got all these plans, all these goals. We're excited. You know, you've got these dreams. You're very faithful. You're thinking, I'm going to be the next evangelist, right? I'm going to baptize 160 people next year. Come on, bring it on. And then we come home and we hit a brick wall. All right, all that stuff you left behind at home. And you got the bills and you got school. You know, the day we got back, we had to, the next day we had to move Candace into the dorms. All right, then we had to move Carmen home for a week and then back into the dorms today. And it's all this stress. Do you guys feel stressed at all? Yeah, there's a lot of stress in life. And that's the title of my sermon today, Stressed Out. Stressed out. And we get distracted by life. All those great dreams we had went right out the window. We've got already our goals. We quit, all due to stress. Now, the question is, what causes you stress? Now, I'm going to confess a little sin here. It's driving. I have a problem driving. People drive me crazy when I'm driving. Why can't everybody drive like me? Right? What's the problem with those people? Man. So I'm just like, I get stressed out driving. All right? Now I got hit by a semi, so that'll add to the stress a little bit there. Flipped my car over, that kind of thing. Real fun. All right? But then, one time I rode with Dave Rodriguez. I was stressed out riding with Dave. It's like, closed my eyes a few times, that kind of thing. The other things that stress me out are taxes. Satan is in taxes, I'm sure of it. Taxes. I get stressed out with computers. You ask my daughters. Drive me crazy. I don't know. I was born a long time ago. I don't get it. Push a button, it's gone. It's like, you older people can relate, can't you? No, nobody can relate with me, right? We have stresses. What is it that stresses you out? You know, the Cubs, yeah. Cubs are frustrating, right? You have a few kids, it can be stressful, right? Your job, the co-worker, fill in the blank. You got stress. Well, how do you deal with it? Well, we're going to talk about that. Let's go to the book of Job. Now, Job had a little bit of stress. Hopefully I can show you a few insights into the book of Job. Little background here about the book of Job. It is believed to be the oldest book of the Bible. They believe it was written between 2100 and 1700 BC. When Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Bible, that was 1400 BC. They don't believe that Job was a Jew, that he was not a part of the nation. But the Jewish nation never challenged the canonization of the book of Job. So that's just a few background things. Look at Job chapter 1. We're going to go into this and read a few chapters. Verse 1. In the land of Uz, there lived a man whose name was Job. This man was blameless and upright. He feared God and shunned evil. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters, and he owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 donkeys, and had a large number of servants. He was the greatest man among all the people of the East. His sons used to take turns holding feasts in their homes, and they would invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. When a period of feasting had run its course, Job would send and have them purified. Early in the morning, he would sacrifice a burnt offering for each of them, thinking, perhaps my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. This was Job's regular custom. One day, the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. The Lord said to Satan, where have you come from? Satan answered the Lord, from roaming through the earth and going back and forth in it. And that'd be kind of a weird situation right there. I just can't really picture this. Angels there, Satan's up there, God's talking to it. It's kind of bizarre to me. Verse 8, then the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil. Does Job fear God for nothing? Satan replied. Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hands, so that his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. But stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. The Lord said to Satan, very well then, everything he has is in your hands. But on the man himself do not lay a finger. Then Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. One day, when Job's sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, a messenger came to Job and said, the oxen were plowing, and the donkeys were grazing nearby, and the Sabaeans attacked and carried them off. They put the servants to the sword, and I'm the only one who has escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, the fire of God fell from the sky and burned up the sheep and the servants, and I'm the only one who escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, the Chaldeans formed 3 raiding parties and swept down on your camels, carried them off. They put the servants to the sword, and I'm the only one who escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, yet another messenger came and said, your sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, when suddenly a mighty wind swept in from the desert and struck the 4 corners of the house. It collapsed on them, and they are dead. And I'm the only one who has escaped to tell you. This is a bad day, okay? This is one where you wish you stayed in bed. Verse 20. At this, Job got up and tore his robe and shaved his head. Then he fell to the ground in worship and said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. In all this, Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing. On another day, the angels came to present themselves before the Lord. Satan also came with them to present himself before him. And the Lord said to Satan, where have you come from? Satan answered the Lord, from roaming through the earth and going back and forth in it. Then the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? There's no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil. And he still maintains his integrity. Though you incited me against him to ruin him without any reason. Skin for skin, Satan replied. A man will give all he has for his own life. Stretch out your hand, strike his flesh and bones, and he will surely curse you to your face. The Lord said to Satan, very well then, he is in your hands, but you must spare his life. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and afflicted Job with painful sores from the soles of his feet to the top of his head. Then Job took a piece of broken pottery and scraped himself with it as he sat among the ashes. His wife said to him, are you still holding on to your integrity? Curse God and die. That is not how you encourage someone, by the way. Wives, do not do this. All right. He replied, you are talking like a foolish woman. Shall we not accept good from God and not trouble? In all this, Job did not sin in what he said. Wow! Job have a little stress in his life? Well, let's look at what happens here. Here you got Satan and the angels coming in, and God, the Bible talks about Job. It says he was blameless and upright, a man who feared God and shunned evil. And you know, you look at his life, and he even goes the extra mile for his children, just in case they do something wrong. Satan comes in. The name Satan means the accuser. And it shows you a little insight into Satan. Where have you come from? Well, I'm roaming around. 1 Peter 5:8, you don't have to turn there. It says, be self-controlled and alert. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. Wow, that's pretty stressful right there. And the Bible says Satan's coming after you. Did you ever see the movie Predator? That's intense. That dude was coming after him. Or Terminator. Terminator, that guy just wouldn't quit. That's this machine that just wants to kill you. Well, that's Satan. That's what the Bible says. And that does put stress on us. Now, you got to look at this. God is bragging on Job. All right? Yeah, look at this. God wants to brag on us, right? And he says, you know, consider Casey. Consider my servant Casey. Now, I would probably go, no, don't give me any attention. I want Satan coming after me. What are you doing? No, it's Anthony. Choose him. You know, don't look. But see, when we do great things, we get God's attention. But we also get Satan's attention. And we got to understand that God wants to hold us up. But Satan wants to destroy those who are doing well. But God is saying this isn't, just a guy. And Satan says, well, you've put a hedge around him. You've taken care of him. He's got all this great stuff. Of course he's doing well. And God's like, no, that's not it. This guy is the real deal. Some people have a lot of wealth and all that. They just don't feel like they need God. But this isn't Job. Job fears God and shuns evil. So he holds him up. But why? Why would God do this to Job? Why would he do this? No. Did God do it? No, it was actually Satan. But God allowed it, right? Why? What's going on here? And we gotta understand that stress is good for us. It teaches us a lot about character. And we have stress in our life. We can become better or we can become bitter. It's our choice. But without stress, we become weak. We become fat and lazy. Stress causes us to engage, to think, to struggle through, to overcome. Stress is good. And Job's life was one of great impact because of how he handles this. Now, if you asked him then what the purpose is, he didn't know. He didn't know for thousands of years we'd be reading this book. And a lot of times we're in the midst of it. We're like, why, God? Why are you doing this to me? And we don't get it. Isn't that frustrating? Come on. Just give me the answer. I'll do it. Man, it's waiting in this moment. Hate it. Give me patience. Give it to me now. But you got to look at the message of the cross. Isn't it the same? Was there a little stress on Jesus there? But because of his suffering, now we can't say he doesn't understand. Because of his suffering, it calls us higher. It calls us and gets our attention. And many were converted because of his suffering. So Job loses everything. And what's his response? Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I depart. What does that mean? Point number one, understand our position. Job understood where he stood before God. Do we? He's like, God gave me everything in the beginning. He gave it all to me. Why do I feel like I deserve this? It's God's choice. God gives us everything. He gives us our abilities. He gives us our house, our car, our family, our friends, our job. And when it's taken away, we get an attitude. We get frustrated. But we have to understand our position. Who are we before God? We are nothing. Without God, we can do nothing. And in our pride, we think we deserve it. We've accomplished it. Look at me. Look what I've done. No, look at what God has done. And God begins to say, hey, you know what? You got to settle down a little bit, pal. You're getting a little prideful here. And that's what happens. We get prideful. When we start to think we deserve stuff, boy, that's a nail in the coffin. Did you ever see the movie Wall Street? A number of years ago. In the movie, there was a guy, his name was Gecko, and he worked Wall Street, and he was doing all sorts of stuff under the table, and he was raising this young buck up, Charlie Sheen, right? Raising this guy up, and who ends up betraying him. Sorry if I blew it for you guys. He betrays him. Anyways, there's a conversation where Gecko says, listen, I made you. I gave you everything. And this is how you treat me? You'd be nothing without me. And he was right. He raised this guy up. And see, we do that to God. God gives us all these things. He gives us so much. And then we begin to reject him when it starts getting tough. So wait a minute. Wait a minute, dude. And we forget what God has done. We lose our things. We lose our house to foreclosure. We lose our job. We lose all these things. And our attitude isn't, okay, God, it was yours. Where are you taking me now? What do you do now? God can give me 10 more houses tomorrow if he wanted to, right? But a lot of times we get caught up in letting go of those things because those become our security other than God. We put our value in our jobs. We put our value in our titles, in our houses. And God says, no, put your value in me. And we forget. It's a faith issue. So Job passes the test, but then what happens? Chapter 2, it happens again. And God says, listen, have you considered my servant KC? No, not again. Go to Anthony. Anybody. I've had enough. I passed the test, remember? There's no one like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God, shuns evil. He still maintains his integrity, though you incited me against him to ruin him without any reason. The word incite means to stir up, to encourage, and Satan was trying to get God to do bad things, and God said, I'm not going to do anything, but I'm going to allow you to. How easy is it for us to get angry at God? What does it take? To what level will you go before you start getting a bad attitude? And you shake your fist at God. And we don't realize God says, you so quickly rejecting me? So quickly? And we assume the worst of God. Or is our attitude, I know God, and I trust him? And do we do that with our other relationships? Are we loyal? And that's point number 2. Understanding loyalty and trust. Job understood God. He trusted God, and he was loyal. But what is our heart towards one another? Are we loyal? Somebody says, hey, Chris said this about you and this and that. Is our attitude, what? I can't believe you do that. Does the alien come out and, Or is our attitude, no, I know Chris. I don't believe that. I need to talk to Chris. Satan takes it to another level. And he starts to attack us physically. This is challenging, guys. Physical suffering creates tremendous stress. And there's a lot of it around us. There's a lot of illness and disease. It takes a lot of our attention. But we don't understand really physical suffering like they did back in the first century. First century, you became a Christian pretty much as your death sentence. You're going to be tortured to death. You may be burned alive. You may be crucified, torn up by wild animals. But are you loyal to Jesus? Are you willing to say, listen, I'm going to come into this relationship knowing I'm going to suffer? That's what it means to be a disciple. You align yourself with God, and you will be persecuted. That's what the Bible says. It's not whether or not, you will. It's going to happen. Because people aren't going to be happy when you challenge them on sin. Physical suffering puts relationships on the line. Are you willing to suffer for someone else because you're loyal? Or do we quit denying ourselves? When we physically suffer, do we in our mind say, now I have a right to complain. Now I have a right to put down my cross. And do we encourage people to say, wow, they've got it rough, and let it go? And see, these are all things that happen because of stress. I need to confess that it's a great fear of mine to just think about suffering horrendously before I die. I've had times when I've suffered physically. And I think, man, if I were tortured, how would I handle that? How would I handle that? Suffering does a lot for us in a lot of ways. But is it a two relationship? Jesus suffered for us. God says, listen, I'm in it. Are you? I'm committed to the end. Are you? Are you quick to quit? See, that's the test of the relationship. 1 John 3:16, they define love. They say that this is what love is, that we lay down our lives for one another. When the going gets tough, do you get going? Do you quit? Or are you with us? Look in Luke chapter 22. Luke 22. We got to always ask ourselves, if it means suffering to support someone, will we continue to do it? Luke 22, verse 54. This is Peter, just before Jesus crucified. Luke 22, verse 54. Then seizing him, they led him away and took him into the house of the high priest. Peter followed at a distance. But when they had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and had sat down together, Peter sat down with them. A servant girl saw him seated there in the firelight. She looked closely at him and said, "This man was with him." But he denied it. "Woman, I don't know him," he said. A little later, someone else saw him and said, "You also are one of them." "Man, I am not," Peter replied. About an hour later, another asserted, "Certainly this fellow was with him, for he is a Galilean." Peter replied, "Man, I don't know what you're talking about." Just as he was speaking, the rooster crowed. The Lord turned and looked straight at Peter. Then Peter remembered the word the Lord had spoken to him. "Before the rooster crows today, you will disown me 3 times. And he went outside and he wept bitterly. Peter's loyalty was challenged here, and he didn't pass the test. 3 times he denied him. Job's loyalty was tested, and he passed the test. Even though someone said, curse God and die. Peter knew. That rooster crowed, he knew, he blew it. And he was close enough that Jesus could turn and look at him. Can you imagine how convicting that was? And he just went outside and he wept. And for the remainder of his life, he remembered that. Every time he heard the rooster crowed. And for us, we got to look at our lives. Are we going to wear a crown of the coward or the crown of Jesus? What defines us? How much suffering you were willing to go through? How much stress? There was a young lady that I knew of. She's married to one of my best friends. She died of cancer. And she had cancer of the colon, which means basically she slowly starved to death. She was in a lot of pain, and she suffered intensely. And she just slowly died. And we can remember the day, they just said, okay, you just need to take her home. There's nothing more we can do. It's like there's no hope. And it was surprising to her how many people were so downcast and discouraged. Because she was not. She was happy. She's like, guys, I'm going to heaven. Be fired up for me. And we had her preach on Sunday. She said, I'm ready to go. How about you? I have a clear conscience. But it shook me. Man, I don't want to suffer. It's hard. But this is life. We're going to suffer no matter what we do. How much suffering are you willing to go through before you throw in the towel? You quit on God and you quit on each other. Now mark my words, you will be tested. Satan is prowling around. He's coming after you and me. He's looking for an opportune time. You will be tested. What will you do? What crown will you wear? Look in Acts 15. Loyalty to God means conflict. Loyalty to God means stress. Acts 15, you look at Paul's life, verse 38. Let's start in verse 36. Sometime later, Paul said to Barnabas, let us go back and visit the brothers in all the towns we preach the word of the Lord and see how they are doing. Barnabas wanted to take John, also called Mark, with them. But Paul did not think it wise to take him because he had deserted them in Pamphylia and had not continued with them in the work. They had such a sharp disagreement that they parted company. Barnabas took Mark and sailed for Cyprus. But Paul chose Silas and left, commended by the brothers to the grace of the Lord. Wow. You look at the situation. Here you got a guy named Mark. Paul says, I don't want to take him. He's a coward. Wow. Such a sharp disagreement that they split company. And I can imagine Barnabas says, you need to give him another chance, Paul. Paul says, no. I won't have it. Now, later on, we find out that this Mark wrote the book of Mark. And history tells us that he was tortured to death. But you look at Paul's intensity here. Have you ever had someone desert you? It's a lot of fun, isn't it? We got to realize that loyalty means a lot in Christianity. We got to be loyal to each other, guys. We got to suffer with each other. We got to hang in there and help each other. We can't give up. That's what the world does. They quit. They give up. Look in 2 Timothy chapter 1.
2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 15. Paul writes this to Timothy. He says, "You know that everyone in the province of Asia has deserted me." We're talking about a whole province. Now, the Asia he's talking about here wasn't the Asia we know of now, but it was still a large territory. And Paul's saying, everybody deserted me. How do you think you'd feel if you were Paul? You're a little gun-shy about people deserting you. 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 9. Now look what he says. "Do your best to come to me quickly, for Demas, because he loved this world, has deserted me and has gone on to Thessalonica. Crescens has gone to Galatia, and Titus to Dalmatia. Only Luke is with me. Get Mark and bring him with you, because he is helpful to me in my ministry." I sent Tychicus, how do you like that name? Tychicus, to Ephesus. "When you come, bring the cloak that I left with Carpus at Troas, and my scrolls, especially the parchments. Alexander the metal worker did me great deal of harm. The Lord will repay him for what he has done. You too should be on your guard against him, because he strongly opposed our message. At my first defense, no one came to my support, but everyone deserted me. May it not be held against them. But the Lord stood at my side and gave me strength, so that through me the message might be fully proclaimed and all the Gentiles might hear it." I would say Paul had a rough life. What kept him going, guys? Constantly being deserted. Why? Death followed him everywhere. Whole provinces deserted him. And he says, let God not hold it against them. Because like Peter, they can come around, they can come back. Like Mark, they can come back. He had learned. Mark is useful to me now. And see, there's something about the battle that we can rise above and once again trust God. Even when we fail, there's always a second, a third, fourth chance. But what are you going to do at the end? I want to acknowledge a few people here with their loyalty. There's a group in the church that we call the Remnant. In our former fellowship, which shattered, fell apart, there's a few people who stood up and said, we're going to do it God's way. And they did not allow the sin of the leadership to stop them, and they fought their way to be back. These are my heroes. They're the Remnant, and they should wear that with a badge of honor. Amen. Bob and Barb McMurray. Amen. Joe and Denise Chapetta, Dave and Bernie, Mary Dawson, Bob Gamari, Nana, Val, Sandy, Kathy, Liz, Luis, Blanca, Felipe, Theo and Leslie, Anthony, Juan and Betty, Patty, Francis and Victor, and Juan Mendoza. Where would the church be without those people? They stood up and they faced against the grain, a lot of stress, and they continued to fight. And I believe that there's a great reward for the Remnant, because without them we would not exist. How does God feel about loyalty? Loyalty is a powerful thing because it's a rare thing. And people will be drawn to it. And we got to fight for it. So how do we handle stress? First, you understand our position before God. Second, you understand loyalty and trust to God. And third, we got to understand the big picture. Look in Job chapter 38. Job chapter 38 So Job has a bunch of guys, four buddies, who try to console him, and they make it worse. They make it more confusing for him for 30-some chapters, and makes Job even more frustrated. And Job begins to really get frustrated because he doesn't have the answers, and you can sense in his character he's starting to lose it a little. Chapter 38, this is what God says. Then the Lord answered Job out of the storm. He said, "Who is this that darkens my counsel with words without knowledge? Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimension? Surely you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it? On what were its footings set? And who laid its cornerstone while the morning stars sang together and all the angels shouted for joy? Who shut up the sea behind doors when it burst forth from the womb? When I made the clouds its garment and wrapped it in thick darkness? When I fixed limits for it and set its doors and bars in place? When I said, this far you may come and no farther? Here is where your proud waves halt. Have you ever given orders to the morning or shown the dawn its place, that it may take earth by the edges, shake the wicked out of it? The earth takes shape like clay under a seal. Its features stand out like those of a garment. The wicked are denied their light, and their upraised arm is broken. You have journeyed to the springs of the sea. Have you journeyed to the springs of the sea, or walked in the recesses of the deep? Have the gates of death been shown to you? Have you seen the gates of shadow of death? Have you comprehended the vast expanses of the earth? Tell me, if you know all this. What is the way to the abode of light? Where does darkness reside? Can you take their places? Do you know the paths of their dwelling? Surely you know, for you were already born. You have lived so many years. Have you entered the storehouses of the snow, or seen the storehouses of the hail, which I reserve for times of trouble, for days of war and battle? What is the way to the place where the lightning is dispersed, or the place where the east winds are scattered over the earth? And he goes on and on and on. Jump down to verse 33. Do you know the laws of the heavens? Can you set up God's dominion over the earth? Can you raise your voice to the clouds and cover yourself with a flood of water? Do you send the lightning bolts on their way? Do they report to you, here we are? Who endowed the heart with wisdom, or gave understanding to the mind? God says, do you know who you're dealing with? Do you understand the greatness of God? And see, Job, you look at this stuff. Imagine giving somebody a mind. That's crazy. Created the oceans. It says he takes walks in the recesses of the deep. That's his quiet time. Walking on the bottom of the ocean. Sending lightning bolts. Hit that guy. Boom. He's going to start seeking me. Yeah. God says, listen, you don't have the answers. And see, that's our frustration. We want to be in control, and we cannot. And because we don't trust God, it creates a tremendous amount of pressure and stress. And then we try to force the issues, which just make it worse. Look in chapter 40, verse 1. Lord said to Job, will the one who contends with the Almighty correct him? Let him answer. Let him who accuses God answer him. Then Job answered the Lord, I'm unworthy. How can I reply to you? I put my hand over my mouth. I spoke once, but I have no answer. Twice, but I will say no more. Then the Lord spoke to Job out of the storm. Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me. Would you discredit my justice? Would you condemn me to justify yourself? And see, that's what we do. We try to justify ourselves. We discredit God.
It's your fault, God. You don't know what you're doing. We're prideful people. Shake our fist at God. Now, if we had a little talk like this with Jesus or God, I don't think we'd be so prideful. Look in Psalm chapter 46. It's my wife's favorite verse. You know, Job says, I'm unworthy. And that's where we got to realize where we stand before God. Job got it in the end. He understood where we stand before God. Look at this passage, Psalm 46. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear. Though the earth give way and the mountains fall in the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging, there is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is within her, she will not fall. God will help her at break of day. Nations are in uproar, kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice, the earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Come and see the works of the Lord, the desolations he's brought on the earth. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. What a powerful passage. You can just sense the spirit of the writer. God is our refuge and strength. We don't rely on anything else. It says he lifts his voice, the earth melts. It's like God goes, hey, and it just melts. It's like, whoa. Some of us have breath problems, but we're not going to go there. Acid test is how do you handle stress? That shows, that's a barometer of where your relationship with God is. In 1947, on October 14th, there was a pilot, test pilot by the name of Chuck Yeager. And he was flying the new experimental Bell X-1. It was a jet. Now, this is 47. They didn't have jets in World War II. And the goal was to break the sound barrier. Mach 1. And he flew this jet at the altitude of 45,000 feet. And as he was approaching the sound barrier, the jet began to shake violently. And he felt like the stress would rip this thing apart. And it became so stressful that the instruments on his panel, the glass started to crack. And the people watching him from below thought, this thing's just going to explode. And the closer he got to Mach 1, the worse it got. And they're telling him, pull out, pull out. And he didn't. And there was an explosion. But it wasn't because the plane exploded. It was because he broke the sound barrier. And they didn't know it was going to happen. They heard this immense explosion that shattered windows. And they thought the plane had blown up because it was going so fast they couldn't see it anymore. But then they heard him saying, hey, something's going wrong here. Something's really crazy. Everything's smooth. And it was just screaming faster. He says, I think the instrument panels are going haywire here. But they weren't. Once he'd broken the sound barrier, it was calm. And see, this is what our relationship with God is like. It becomes more and more violent when we refuse to surrender to God until we break through. And then it's calm sailing. Have you ever done that where you fought, and finally you surrender and everything goes okay and you're like, why did I do that?
And God says, listen, I want calm for your life, but you're not in control. I am. Trust me. Until we surrender and quit fighting God, we will always have immense amount of stress that we can't handle. The great thing is when stress comes upon you and it doesn't bother you, people are attracted to that. Wow, this guy is rock solid. How does that happen? With God. All things are possible. That needs to be us, because that should be our relationship with God. Do you understand your position before God? Do you understand your loyalty in trusting God? Do you understand the picture, the big picture? And are you surrendered to God? I'm going to leave with this challenge. I want you to ask yourself, what causes me the most stress? And then I want you to ask someone, what do you see I'm holding on to that I'm unwilling to let go? And then attack the problem. Amen.
All right, guys, let's stand on up and turn your songbook to 445.